Paul Owen Pappy Gunn stands as one of the most unlikely yet impactful figures in the history of World War II aviation. Born on October 18, 1899, in the small rural town of Quitman, Arkansas. Gunn grew up in a modest family as one of 7, all children to a blacksmith father. The early 20th century was an era of rapid technological change, and young Paul became captivated by the emerging world of flight. Stories of the Wright brothers' achievements and the daring aerial combats of World War I filled newspapers and magazines, igniting a lifelong passion for airplanes as a teenager. Gunn dreamed of flying, but opportunities were limited in rural Arkansas. When the United States entered World War I in 1917, he saw his chance. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy shortly before America's full mobilization, starting as an aircraft mechanic. The Navy's aviation branch was in its infancy, relying on rudimentary seaplanes and land-based trainers. Gunn excelled in his role, maintaining engines, rigging wires, and learning the intricacies of early aircraft construction during his service. He taught himself to fly on off-duty hours using surplus planes, a bold and self-driven initiative that set him apart from many peers. This hands-on experience with mechanics and piloting would become the foundation of his later innovations after the armistice in 1918. Gunn briefly left the service but re-enlisted in 1923. He was selected for training as a naval aviation pilot NAP, one of the rare enlisted aviators qualified to fly Navy aircraft. NAPs were valued for their practical knowledge and cost-effectiveness compared to commissioned officers. Gunn joined Fighter Squadron 1B, known as the Torfetters, one of the Navy's oldest and most storied fighter units, flying biplanes such as the Curtiss F-6C. Hawk and later models, he participated in fleet exercises, gunnery drills, and carrier operations experiments. His skill earned him respect, and by the late 1920s, he became a flight instructor at Naval Air Station Pensacola, Florida, the Annapolis of the air. There, he trained hundreds of future naval aviators, emphasizing precision, low-level flying, and mechanical troubleshooting. In 1921, Gunn married Clara Louise Polly Crosby, and the couple began building a family that would eventually include 4 children to sons and to daughters. Life in the Navy involved frequent relocations and long separations. But Gunn thrived on the discipline and camaraderie after 21 years of service. He retired as a Chief Petty Officer in December 1939 at age 40. Seeking a new chapter, he moved his family to the Philippines, a U.S. Commonwealth with growing economic ties. There, he helped establish Philippine Airlines PAL. Starting with 5 privately owned Beechcraft airplanes, Gunn ran civilian air freight and passenger services across the archipelago, connecting Manila to remote islands. He enjoyed the independence, the tropical climate, and the opportunity to build a business from scratch. Outbreak of World War II shattered this peaceful life on December 8, 1941 local time. Japanese forces attacked the Philippines hours after Pearl Harbor. Gunn immediately volunteered for evacuation missions, using his civilian planes to fly American personnel and supplies out of Japanese-held areas. His family, Polly, and the 4 children remained in Manila in January 1942. As Japanese troops occupied the city, they were interned at Santo Tomas University, a colonial-era campus converted into a prison camp for over 3,700 Allied civilians. Conditions were harsh: overcrowding, limited food rations, disease outbreaks, and constant uncertainty. Malnutrition and illness took a toll, and internees lived under the threat of execution if Allied forces approached too closely. Guinea's wartime contributions began in earnest. In early 1942, he flew an unarmed and armored airplane into hostile airspace to deliver medical supplies to besieged troops on Bataan, For this daring act, he earned the Distinguished Flying Cross. In April 1942, he participated in the Royce mission, a bold raid using B-25 Mitchell bombers flown from Australia to strike Japanese targets in the Philippines and deliver supplies. Gunn piloted one of the aircraft, surviving intense anti-aircraft fire and a subsequent crash landing in the jungle. These experiences solidified his reputation as a fearless low-level flyer. In the summer of 1942, Lieutenant General George C. Kenny assumed command of Allied air forces in the Southwest Pacific area. Kenny inherited a challenging theater. Japanese convoys reinforced New Guinea at will, while high-altitude bombing proved ineffective against moving ships, and low-level attacks resulted in heavy losses from anti-aircraft fire. Kenny sought innovative solutions. He discovered Gunn converting Douglas A-20 Havoc light bombers of the 3rd Bombardment Group Light into strafers. Gunn had stripped 50 caliber machine guns from wrecked P-39 Airacobra and P-40 Warhawks aircraft damaged beyond repair and mounted 4 of them in the A-20's glass nose. Replacing the bombardier position, this created a forward-firing armament package capable of suppressing deck guns during low-level approaches. Kenny was impressed by Gunn's resourcefulness using salvaged parts, field welding, and trial-and-error testing. He immediately appointed the former Navy chief to his personal staff as Special Projects Officer. Gunn's A-20 modifications proved highly successful in low-level strikes against Japanese shipping and ground targets. The planes flew at mast height 50 to 200 feet, strafing to neutralize anti-aircraft crews before skip bombing, dropping bombs with delayed fuses to ricochet across water and strike hulls below the water. By September 1942, modified A-20s raided Buna Airfield at treetop level, destroying aircraft and positions with minimal losses. The A-20's short range limited its effectiveness over vast ocean distances, so Gunn scaled up to the North American B-25 Mitchell medium bomber. The B-25 offered longer range, heavier payload, and more structural space. Gunn removed the bombardier station and standard nose armament, installing 4 50 caliber guns in the nose. He added 4 more in external cheek packs on the fuselage sides and rotated the dorsal turret forward for additional fire. Later conversions reached 14 forward firing, 50 calibers, delivering a devastating barrage. These commerce destroyers were nose-heavy and vibration-prone, requiring rebalancing by shifting equipment and adjusting trim. Ground crews at the 81st Air Depot Group in Townsville worked tirelessly to convert squadrons. Engineers at Wright Field in Ohio reviewed the field modifications and deemed them impractical, too heavy, unbalanced, and structurally risky. They recommended grounding the planes. Kenny overruled them, flying to Washington to confront General Henry Hap Arnold. He pointed out that Gunn's impossible B-25s had already proven themselves in combat. Arnold approved factory integration, and North American Aviation incorporated variations into later models, the B-25G with a solid nose and 75mm cannon, the B-25 each with improved gun packs, and the B-25J with up to 18.50 calibers, the most heavily armed production bomber in history. These innovations reached their pinnacle in the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, March 2nd to 4th, 1943. Japanese intelligence had planned Operation 81 to reinforce New Guinea, with 6,900 troops aboard 8 transports and 8 destroyers, Allied codebreakers in Melbourne. Frommel decrypted messages revealing the convoy's departure from Rabaul on February 28th. Kenny had 72 hours to intercept. Monsoon weather, low clouds and rain was expected to protect the Japanese, but aerial reconnaissance spotted them on March 1st or March 2nd. High-altitude B-17 flying fortresses attacked, sinking 1 transport Kyukusei Maru and damaging others. but scoring limited hits, Japanese Zeros provided cover. March 3rd saw the decisive low-level assault. RAF Beaufighters strafed first to suppress anti-aircraft guns, followed by guns-modified A-20s and B-25s at mast height. Coordinated waves attacked from multiple directions, strafing to shred decks and bridges while skipped bombs and mast-height drops scored hull hits. The convoy scattered, but the firepower overwhelmed defenses. By March 4th, all 8 transports and 4 destroyers were sunk. Japanese losses, round 2,890 dead, only 1,200 troops reaching the Allied losses to bombers, 4 fighters, 13 killed. The battle ended Japanese sea reinforcements to New Guinea. Shifting momentum in the southwest Pacific, Gunn's strafers validated low-level tactics, with hit rates far exceeding traditional bombing. Kenny sent Gunn to California to oversee factory production. Gunn continued flying combat missions. Driven by his family's captivity, in November 1944, he was wounded in a Japanese raid on Tacloban airfield. On February 3, 1945, U.S. forces liberated Santo Tomas. Gunn reunited with Polly and the children on February 4. Polly weighed just 89 pounds. The children suffered malnutrition, but they survived. Retired as a full colonel in June 1948 due to medical disability. Gunn rebuilt Philippine Airlines from 3 surplus C-47s into an international carrier serving Hong Kong, Bangkok, and beyond. His decorations included 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, Air Medal, 9 Purple Hearts, and the WWII Victory Medal on October 11, 1957, at age 57. Gunn died in a Beechcraft crash during a storm over the Cordillera Mountains in the Philippines. The attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, sent shockwaves across the Pacific, but for Paul Pappy Gunn in Manila, the war arrived even sooner. Local time in the Philippines was December 8th, when Japanese bombers struck Clark Field and other U.S. bases north of the capital. Gunn, then 42 years old and running his civilian air freight operation with Philippine Airlines PAL, knew the implications immediately. The Japanese Imperial Army and Navy had been expanding aggressively in China and Southeast Asia, and the Philippines as the U.S. Commonwealth were a prime target. Gunn's family, wife Clara Louise Polly Crosby, and their 4 children, sons Paul Jr. and Nathaniel, daughters Julia and Barbara, were living in Manila, enjoying the tropical life he had built after retiring from the Navy 2 years earlier. Gunn had come to the Philippines seeking a fresh start. After 21 years in the Navy, starting as a mechanic in 1918, self-teaching himself to fly, re-enlisting in 1923 as a naval aviation pilot, serving with the Tarfata Squadron, and instructing at Pensacola, he retired as Chief Petty Officer in December 1939. The move to Manila allowed him to help found PAL with 5 Beechcraft planes, operating passenger and freight services across the islands. It was a small but thriving business, short hops to Cebu, Davao, and other outposts, carrying mail, goods, and people through the archipelago's beautiful but challenging terrain. Gunn loved the independence, the open cockpits, the humid air, the sense of building something lasting. But as tensions escalated in 1941, with Japanese forces occupying French Indochina and threatening the Dutch East Indies, Gunn sensed the storm coming. When the bombs fell on December 8th, Gunn's civilian planes were grounded almost immediately under military orders. He volunteered for evacuation missions, using his unarmed Beechcraft to ferry American civilians, military dependents, and supplies away from advancing Japanese forces. These flights were perilous. No armor, no guns, navigating through contested airspace with Japanese Zero fighters dominating the skies. Gunn flew low to avoid detection, hugging coastlines and rivers, landing on makeshift strips. His experience as a Navy instructor paid off. He kept calm under pressure, calculating risks with the precision of a man who had flown biplanes in fleet exercises decades earlier. By late December 1941, Japanese landings on Luzon forced U.S. and Filipino forces under General Douglas MacArthur to withdraw to the Baton Peninsula and Corregidor Island. Manila was declared an open city on January 2, 1942, to avoid destruction, but the occupation brought immediate hardship. Holly and the children were among thousands of Allied civilians, Americans, British, Australians, and others rounded up by Japanese authorities. On January 4, 1942, they were interned at Santo Tomas Internment Camp, a former university campus surrounded by high walls and guarded by Japanese troops. Initially, conditions seemed tolerable. Internees could bring personal belongings, and the camp had some facilities. But as months passed, reality set in. Food rations dwindled to rice gruel and occasional vegetables. Malnutrition spread. Diseases like beriberi, dysentery, and malaria became common due to poor sanitation and limited medicine. The internees lived in constant fear. Japanese guards enforced strict rules, and rumors circulated that the camp would be executed if Allied invasion forces approached. Gunn received fragmented news through Red Cross messages and escaped contacts. The separation gnawed at him. His family was trapped, suffering, while he was free to fight. This personal stake drove him more than any military order ever could. In early 1942, he earned the Distinguished Flying Cross for a daring mission, flying in an armored civilian plane into hostile airspace to deliver medical supplies to besieged troops on Bataan. Japanese anti-aircraft fire and patrolling fighters made the run suicidal, but Gunn succeeded, dropping the cargo and returning safely. The award was a small recognition, but it highlighted his willingness to risk everything. In April 1942, Gunn joined the Royce mission, a high-risk operation authorized by President Roosevelt to boost morale and deliver aid to Bataan. Led by Brigadier General Ralph Royce, the mission involved 10 B-25 Mitchell bombers flown from Australia to Mindanao, then staging attacks on Japanese targets in the Philippines. Gunn piloted one of the B-25s, navigating through enemy-held territory to bomb airfields and drop supplies. The mission achieved limited tactical success but was a propaganda victory, proving the Allies could strike back. Gunn's plane took hits. He crash-landed in the jungle after the mission, surviving with minor injuries. This experience introduced him to the B-25, a rugged, twin-engine medium bomber with excellent range and payload, and planted seeds for later modifications. By summer 1942, Gunn had escaped to Australia, where Allied forces were regrouping under General MacArthur's Southwest Pacific Area Command. The theater was dire. Japanese convoys reinforced New Guinea with impunity, while high-altitude bombing by B-17s and other heavies missed moving ships or got shredded by flak when they descended. Low-level attacks were even deadlier. Anti-aircraft guns and Zeros tore through attackers before bombs could be released accurately. Gunn, now commissioned directly into the U.S. Army Air Forces as a captain due to his extensive flying experience, was assigned to the 5th Air Force. General George C. Kenney arrived in July 1942 as 5th Air Force commander and quickly recognized the need for innovation. Traditional tactics weren't working. Kenney toured bases and met Gunn, who was already experimenting with Douglas A-20 Havoc light bombers. The A-20 was fast and maneuverable, but carried a standard glass nose for a bombardier and light defensive armament. Gunn had an idea: repurpose the nose for firepower using .50 caliber machine guns salvaged from wrecked P-39 Air Cobra and P-40 Warhawks fighters too damaged to fly again. He mounted for guns in the A-20s nose, removing the bombardier position and installing a steel frame to hold the weapons. Each gun weighed about 64 pounds, plus ammunition adding significant forward weight. The modifications were crude, field-welded mounts, no formal engineering drawings, just trial and error. The first test flights were nerve-wracking. The plane flew nose heavy, wanting to dive, barely climbing. Guns spent days rebalancing, shifting radio gear aft, adjusting tail trim, redistributing equipment. The second test pilot reported the A-20 flew angry but controllable. Kenny was impressed. Gunn's practical genius born from years as a mechanic and pilot fit perfectly with Kenny's aggressive style. He appointed Gunn to his personal staff as Special Projects Officer, giving him carte blanche to experiment. These early A-20 strafers proved effective in low-level strikes. Flying at tree-top height or mast height over water, they suppressed anti-aircraft guns with concentrated fire. Then skip bomb dropping 500-pound bombs with delayed fuses to skip across waves and hit ship. Holes below the waterline. By September 1942, modified A-20s raided Japanese airfields at Buna, destroying planes and gun positions with zero losses. The concept worked, but the A-20s range was too short for deep strikes across the Owen Stanley Mountains. Gunn needed a bigger platform, the B-25 Mitchell. Throughout 1942, Gunn's motivation remained personal. Letters from Santo Tomas were read and censored, but reports of worsening conditions, food shortages, illness, deaths reached him. He flew every mission hoping to get closer to liberation. The family separation fueled his relentless drive. Holly, once vibrant, was now in a camp where survival meant rationing every crumb. The children faced malnutrition. One son contracted malaria. Gunn confided to colleagues that he wouldn't rest until they were free. By late 1942, Gunn's experiments had shifted to the B-25. He pulled the bombardier and nose guns from a B-25C, installing 4 .50 calibers in the solid nose for in cheat packs, and rotating the top turret forward 10 guns total, later expanded to 14. The plane became a flying destroyer, firing 215 pounds of lead per second. Crews called it Pappy's folly, but tests showed it flew nose heavy but deadly. Wright Field engineers later dismissed the changes as impossible, but Gunn's field fixes proved them wrong. This period marked Gunn's transition from pilot to innovator, driven by necessity and the desperate hope of saving his family.